folks, it's Barry Chamish after a very good interview, and now we've got an old friend. He wrote a book that I went through, long book, but it was really well researched, called LBJ, the Mastermind of JFK's Assassination. Philip, are you there?
Yes, I am, Barry. How are you?
Oh, no, it's great to have you back. And
Thank you. Nice to be back.
Well, all I can say is I will tell you how, if I'm not hacked to death, I will tell you how we're listened to for a week. But your first points, now I want you to know, I really don't know who this Noam Chomsky is, but people write me about him, and apparently I should know him. What do you mean? What devices does Chomsky use to avoid engaging in meaningful dialogue? Who is Chomsky, and what devices are he using?
Well, Noam Chomsky is a very well-known, I guess you could call him a leftist iconoclast philosopher. He's has a legend about him that perhaps thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions around the world, take his word as gospel for some reason.
Really?
And I just have big problems with that because he seems to be wrong on so many things. But we'll get into all that.
I'm not shy.
But to answer to let me say this about your first question, though, because he is described as a prominent cultural figure and has been voted the, quote, world's top public intellectual.
Really?
And he is cited as a source more than any other living scholar. So,
now, who voted him?
Well, there's something called the Arts and Humanities Citation Index that said a lot of that stuff. And some of that's all on Wikipedia. You can read all about him there. He's famous for getting into some real tussles with people, including Alan Dershowitz, of all people.
He's a lawyer. He's from New York, I believe.
Well, he was at Harvard. He was a law professor up there.
Right. So what is the tussle about?
Well, in this situation, he got into this thing with Dershowitz, and Dershowitz considered Chomsky to be a, quote, false prophet of the left, while Chomsky accused Dershowitz of actively misrepresenting Chomsky's position on issues and called him a liar, complete liar.
Have they made up?
I don't know. I don't keep track of that, but that's all part of the record. And
right.
Anyway, he has challenged many precepts of accepted conventional wisdom over the years, and he's been wrongfully accused of being everything from a neocon to an apologist for Cambodia leader Pol Pot, which he denied. So he's got a very checkered past, but he's a very famed intellectual supposedly.
Well, people tell me to look him up, and when I have been unimpressed.
Well, I have too, and I guess we can agree on all that, because I guess my thought is that his background is as a linguist. Okay, that's his PhD.
How I know. Right, that's how I know him.
But he doesn't seem to have translated very well in such other fields as American history in the mid 20th century, even though he expresses his views on that all the time.
What is Chomsky's real agenda here?
Well,
he's a linguist. Why doesn't he stick to language?
Well, I guess he is luxuriating in all the popularity he's achieved over the years. But the problem that I have with him is that he actually has said on many occasions, this is not just a slip of the tongue once, he said over and over and over again that the assassination of JFK had no significant effect on the trajectory of the U.S. foreign or domestic policy. So
I want to get to that later because we have a lot in common. Peter Hunem came to me when he wrote his book about the Liberty.
Yes, I
And
remember that.
so let's go to this step by step. What is, besides the JFK assassination being meaningless, what is Chomsky's agenda? What's he doing?
Well, he is noted as as a very strong critic of Israel and everything Israel has done, and which is, there's a lot of people who have done that, I guess. But the problem is that he's it gets back to the USS Liberty incident. That's what this is all about.
Oh gosh.
At least in my
All
world.
right, and I want to leave that to last. Let's just finish this off first.
Okay. Well, let me get back to.
A JFK assassination, it didn't change American history.
Yeah.
Actually, why not? It certainly changed my Friday, changed my life a bit. I assumed it changed other people's.
Well, I believe it changed dramatically with when JFK was assassinated and Johnson stepped into the presidency. Along with it, he brought in what a lot of people refer to as the national security state. At least in my estimation, LBJ was the heart and center of that, and that he was really the CEO, in my opinion, of the national security state or the invisible government, whatever you want to call it.
Was it 63 to the election or 64 to 68?
Well, it was within 3 or 4 days of his becoming president on November the 22nd. By November the 25th and 26th, he was changing the entire policy regarding Vietnam because JFK
it wasn't JFK's foreign policy. I mean, he got American troops in there. Didn't he keep it up?
Well, no, I have to correct you on that. What he did, actually, it started years before under Eisenhower, and even before that, it evolved kind of slowly.
Well,
However,
from the French, if you want to go way back to the.
Oh yeah, but let's not go all the way back there. Let's just keep it into the 60s.
Fair
what
enough.
happened? 63. What happened with JFK? JFK's policy, although he was slowly adding additional advisors, okay, not troops per se, but advisors who were supposedly training the South Vietnamese troops in the early 60s, and he never really backed off from that. He never had agreed to ever bring in actual combat troops, and in fact, he had just a year.
He brought in 500,000. Before his next, there were 500,000 at his height.
Well, that was under Johnson. That's my point.
Right.
Johnson,
okay.
Under Kennedy, it had risen from about 5,000 to about 15 or 16,000.
Right.
And by the time that JFK was assassinated, however, a month before he was killed, he had already signed a national security action memorandum. It's called NSAM number 263, that called for a reduction of those advisors by 1,000 by the end of that year, 1963, and that all the rest of them were to be brought home by the end of 1965.
So Chomsky is wrong. JFK assassination started a war.
Chomsky is wrong on a lot of counts. Number one, that he says that he blames all of it on Kennedy, but he doesn't acknowledge that Kennedy had made that commitment to withdraw the troops from Vietnam. And I've got a lot of details on that if you want to hear them. Secondly,
yeah, sure. By the way,
well, let me just hit the three items that I'm referring to. That was the first, and that Kennedy had launched. According to Chomsky, JFK had launched bombing raids and other aggressive offensive military actions against Vietnam back in 61 and 62. It is simply not true. It was always the advisor, and sometimes there may have been some stopovers, but it was not an intentional action by Kennedy. And thirdly, uh, he maintains that there had never been sufficient evidence to doubt the official government findings that JFK was killed by a lone nut, and therefore, absent evidence to the contrary, there was no reason to suspect a plot or what might be considered a coup d'etat. In other words, he's accepting the government line, the Warren Commission findings, which everyone should know by now.
No, everyone does
just
know.
BS, and it was a rigged investigation. It was a non-investigation, frankly. But
nobody
according
believes.
to Chomsky, he doesn't recognize any of that.
Nobody believes the lone gunman theory. Nobody. I say that, by the way, for Rabin as well. Those days are done. But how to bring the guilty party to justice, that has not been found.
Well, yeah, that we're still working on that item.
Yeah,
Okay, but
I
just
know.
getting back to what Chomsky has said, he has insisted all along that JFK's decision was conditional. That quote, the withdrawal without victory thesis rests on the assumption that Kennedy realized that the optimistic military reports were incorrect. Not a trace of supporting evidence appears in the internal record or is suggested by people, by real students of all that, such as John Newman. Such a statement is simply inconsistent with what John Newman has painstakingly written in a meticulously detailed and well-sourced book.
Yes,
and a lot of
did.
others. Like that's just
Did
one
he
example.
write a book, to answer you? Is there a Chomsky book that Oswald killed Kennedy?
No. Actually, the point is that the Chomsky admits that he has not even studied the JFK assassination, but he gives us the reason why is because it didn't make any difference anyway. See? What he's saying.
Oh, I get it.
What he's saying
Who
here
cares
is
if
it
he's
didn't matter
dead?
anyway. So why bother looking into it? And
Right.
that for a famed intellectual is just incomprehensible to me. I don't. It doesn't.
Johnson
compute.
didn't run for a second term. By then, America was so deeply, deeply bleeding, he didn't have a chance. So there was a change in American history. But who am I to
Well,
answer?
okay. To respond to that, the
Yeah.
reason that I believe that Johnson didn't run is because, and I have to say it gets back to the USS Liberty thing.
All right, I'm the
Because it
expert
was
at
Johnson who set that up, and Chomsky will never figure that out because he doesn't think it made any difference anyway. That Johnson was simply an extension of Kennedy. It's ridiculous, but that's what he.
that. All right, you want to do the Liberty. Now, look, you know Peter Hunem, right? You know his book and all that.
Oh yes, I referenced it many times.
All right, he came to
great book.
Israel. Yes, and by the way, I liked him. Politically, we're a little different, but I liked him. Here's what he did and why he visited me, and it's in his book. I don't even remember the name. It's been so long, but I found a pilot. I interviewed a pilot who bombed the Liberty, and he told me he saw the American flag. They dumped the bombs in the Mediterranean and headed for home. He said they could have overpowered it. The Israeli pilots didn't want to. He found my pilot, and he was arrested, by the way, on landing.
Yeah, he was arrested because he wouldn't follow the orders to attack the Liberty.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's my little background on this. I found something out. He confirmed it, and lo and behold, the Israelis saw an American flag. They didn't want to sink the ship. All right, let's do the Liberty. Fine.
Well, no, that is secondary. We were talking about Noam Chomsky and the reason that he has failed I believe, even in the face of the fact that he is this renowned intellectual that everybody just worships, and that's just incomprehensible to me. I just don't, I can't handle that. So I
Well,
could go on with
ignore
that,
it.
or if you want to talk about the liberty, that's fine. But
Oh, we're going to get to that.
that is incidental to the subject that I was referencing about
Well,
Noam
no,
Chomsky.
I've got that for
See
the
what?
first half of
Okay,
the
and what
show.
it boils down to, Barry, is this: that while Chomsky goes off heavily attacking Israel for that, he puts the 100% of the blame on Israel. My point is, and I'm proving it. I think I'm
Yes,
going to be
you
proving it in
proved it
my new
very
book
well.
on
Oh,
on it's
oh,
called.
I'm sorry. Stop me. What is your new book? We
Well,
should be
it's
plugging that.
it's not going to be out until next year. It's going to be published by about February or March of 2017. So it'll be out there on the anniversary, the 50th year anniversary of the attack on the Liberty. The book is going to be out there, and basically, it's going to put the onus of the blame really on Johnson. It was Johnson who worked with Israeli leadership against their instincts. They didn't want to do it.
I'm not
That-
sure if the higher ups. Remember this 67. Um, well,
well,
Rabinian.
he had tried. As this is in Peter Houghton's book also
Yes.
that Yitzhak Rabin had gone to David Ben Gurion just around it was on May the 21st of 67 to discuss with him the pending war plans, and Ben Gurion reacted very strongly. He was very upset with Rabin and all the rest of them for doing this. He thought it was going to put Israel in a very vulnerable state, that there could be a major war break out and it could destroy Israel. And Rabin was so upset that he came near having a nervous breakdown, and basically
He did have a
out
nervous
the war.
breakdown. He actually was not involved in the war. He was broken.
That's right. That is correct. And the reason is because of that interaction with Ben Gurion, who just raked him over the coals about it. And basically, he sat out. So Johnson then had to go to Moshe Dayan
Yep, he sure did.
and convince him to do the attack. And basically, what I'm getting at here is that I'm basically, as in a roundabout way, I guess you could say, defending Israel because they were forced to do what they did by none other than Lyndon Johnson.
Now,
And-
this is
and guess what
complicated. Yes.
his reasons were, though? Johnson, you have to understand the background of Johnson. He had a lot of mental issues, psychiatric and psychological issues that caused him to have a very difficult time with reality. He did this basically at that time. He was attempting to do something that he thought would ensure another landslide victory for him in 1968. That was a year before. He had decided that it wouldn't work, and the reason it didn't work is because his plan failed when the Liberty didn't sink. That sunk his whole plan for
A Gulf of Tonkin in the Middle East.
yeah, that was the first of the false flags of his. His second major, I call it treason, after the JFK assassination.
Okay, wait, you're saying he was involved. Just so my readers, to remind you, you're saying LBJ arranged the assassination, even though he was in the car in front of him, and in theory could have been shot himself.
Well, not really, because he knew it was going to happen, and he ducked. He got under the seat before the first shot was fired. He ducked behind the seats. And the Altgens photograph that I have in my book proves that. You really can't see him. Some people say that they claim that they see him, but they must have X-ray vision because he's not in the photograph.
This will be in your upcoming book.
Well,
The
the,
photos
the
of him
upcoming
jump.
book due out in the early part of 2017 is called Remember the Liberty. And
Oh, really?
yes,
Oh,
it's just about the Liberty, and it's just about all of the things that we're discussing. Well, it goes way beyond that.
no, we're going to
But
discuss this in real detail now. I could be actually part of making your book even better. Oh, I'm looking forward to this. Look, to finish, before we get to the Liberty, let's just say one thing. Johnson knew the shots were coming. You have photographic proof that he ducked, and
right, that's
well,
in my book, the first book.
alrighty. Now look, we have a couple seconds right now. I want to do all Liberty, so plug yourself. How do people find your book? LBJ, the
Okay.
mastermind. How do we get to your first book?
Okay. Well, the LBJ, the mastermind of the JFK assassination, was the first book. That was written originally in 2010 and updated in 2011 and 2013. So it's still out there. It's available wherever books are sold, including Amazon and Books A Million and Barnes and Noble and so forth, and your local bookstores as well. The second book,
Yes.
which came out in 2014, is called LBJ From Mastermind to the Colossus. And the second book is all about his presidency, and it covers a lot of other things that happened, including Vietnam, of course. And there are 2 chapters in that book on the Liberty. However, there were things that were not included because I had not been aware of them when that book was written. And they are in the third book, the Remember the Liberty, which is due out next year.
Oh, that's a very, very good plug. And it will be on Amazon as well, I'm assuming, or do you have a
Yes.
publisher?
Well, the publisher of the first 2 books is Skyhorse. And I have websites out there so people can go to them.
How? Where's the
Well,
websites?
well, one is simply LBJ, the mastermind.com.
Dot.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And the second one is LBJ Colossus. And
.com as well.
yes, sure.
Okay.
And so both of those books, both of those websites explain both of the existing books in considerable detail. And you can learn quite a bit about it also from just reading the reviews on Amazon. There are a lot of reviews on that first book. It's something like 224 now.
That many, huh? Alrighty. Now look, I'm gonna plug me, and then we're gonna spend the last half hour on a subject somehow or another I found out about, and we can actually exchange views. Look, all my books are at lulu.com. That's www.lulu.com. In the search box, write in my last name, Chamish, Chamish. That will get you to all my books. And here's hoping my website is up. That's www.barrychamish.com. Now we're going to take a short break. There it is, the 3 bleeps. We'll be back in 3 minutes, and we'll dive into the Liberty. Away we go in 3. Folks, this is Barry Chamish with Phillip Nelson. See you in 3 minutes. 3.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today, so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy Reality News app. Get it now. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
Hey, folks, I think we're doing pretty good today. Look, we're going into why. Look, on the 8th of June, Israel had won the Six-Day War. It started on the 5th. The Egyptian Air Force was exploded, didn't exist. So why bother attacking an American ship? All right, our guest Philip Nelson explains what this false flag, Gulf of Tonkin style attack was all about. Go ahead.
Yes, well, the irony is, of course, let's just stop for a second and compare those two false flags. You have in the Gulf of Tonkin, that was a false flag that succeeded, even though there was never really an attack to begin with.
I think there was. Well.
Oh no, it's been proven over and again that it was all a mirage. There was nothing going on out there. That there were no little North Vietnam motorboats attacking two U.S. destroyers, which is an absurdity on the face of it. Anyway, that one didn't even happen. Yet on the other one, on the one in 1967, that was a real attack. That was a viciously brutal attack. Yet the ship did not sink, and it failed, and therefore the false flag attempt failed. And we had instead a massive cover-up that we still live with today for 50
Well,
years now, almost 50 years, 49.
I know I have to live with people telling me that Israel attacked America. I've lived. Look, LBJ had a plan to nuke Cairo after the Liberty was sunk. Let's go into
Yeah,
that.
that was the false flag. That's exactly right, Barry. I'm not arguing with that whatsoever. I mean, there was a vicious attack. However, it wasn't anything that anybody in Israel had any motive to do. Just look
Nope.
at it that way. How on earth could anybody in their right mind, and that's a key there, in their right mind, propose such a thought, such a proposal? It's like anybody with any
Well,
sense and
hold on.
any.
I have to add, Nasser, the president of Cairo, had a big fight over the Aswan Dam, and he became a Russian ally. And
Right, that's right.
there was a reason to get rid of Nasser. And in fact, this nuclear bombing was called up just 3 minutes before it would have happened.
Right. The jets were on the way to Cairo because the assumption was that the Liberty was sinking, and since it didn't sink, they had to call it off, and as a result, that attack went on for over 2 hours because the idea was it's got to sink. The whole plan required that the Liberty sink and take everybody on board with it, and in that, had that happened, that attack would have ensued, and we would have risked, a major conflagration over there, possibly a nuclear war, possibly World War III. But it
And
didn't
once
happen
again,
because the Liberty didn't sink.
The
And
Russians were, let's not make a mistake. If there was going to be a nuclear war, it would have involved Russia.
well, there's no question. And they had a big fleet out there too. They were ready. They had ships right off the Israeli coast, and they were ready to engage if it came to that. However, it didn't come to that, thank God, because the Liberty didn't sink. Now there are a lot of reasons. There's a whole sequence of what some
Yep.
people, some of the
Yep.
survivors call miracles that happened that kept it afloat, kept it from sinking, and therefore that Johnson's diabolical plan failed, and the result was not only did the Liberty not sink, but this huge secrecy plan and the cover-up was put in place of it, so that hardly anybody, if you go out on the street today and ask them if they ever heard of the USS Liberty attack, I can guarantee you maybe 1 in 100 might say, well, yeah, I remember something about that. But even then, they aren't going to know too much about it.
The problem
and even
is
then,
the survivors still don't know anything about it. They have a website. As a matter of fact, it's called USSLiberty.org, where it's just filled with wrong information.
well, a lot of the wrong information, though, I have to speak up for the survivors because
Okay.
they have no other. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have thought that the President of the United States would have set this whole thing up for his own narrow political agenda? That's what it comes down to.
Well, Peter Hunem thought that. Look,
Well, yes, he did, but he didn't.
he wrote.
didn't
I want to
put the
add
pieces
this
together.
first. I want to
That's
add this first before we go on, so we have another source. Peter Hunem is Hounam. He wrote Operation Cyanide: Why the Bombing of the USS Liberty Nearly Caused World War III. You're not alone. That's all I can say. And I played a role. I found him the pilot who dumped his bombs into the Mediterranean, and it's in his book.
Yeah, it
That's
is.
all.
And there's nothing in his book that I disagree with, by the way. I'm not criticizing Peter
Oh,
Howden
he's a good
at
guy.
all.
He's a good guy.
He had done a very excellent job, a meticulous job of documenting what he documented. However, what he didn't factor in enough was the mental collapse of Lyndon Baines Johnson, and that he did allude to the fact that it appeared to him that this whole thing was driven by the White House, i.e. Johnson, but he didn't really put the rest of that together, which I have attempted to do in this
Well,
last
we're
book.
going to get to, well, your previous book did a darn good job. Look, we have to start with what actually happened. Let's talk Robert McNamara for a couple of seconds. Who he was, what his role was. Let's talk Robert McNamara.
Okay, well, Robert McNamara was, I think the key attribute of Robert McNamara was that he was devoted to whatever the president at the time wanted him to do. That's what he did, and without questioning the legalities, the morality, or anything else. Because back when he was working for JFK, and JFK was giving him the order to ramp down the Vietnam War, that's exactly what he did for 2.5, 3 years. That was the top of his agenda, and he kept pressing to accomplish that. He was told that by Kennedy that he wanted to ramp down and reduce the troops, and that is precisely what we know that he did now, thanks to such authors as Jonathan Newman and the scholar Peter Dale Scott. They've documented that completely. However, as soon as then he started working for Lyndon Johnson, it got all switched around, and there he was working as a yes man for Johnson, and Johnson's strategies, if you can call it that, it was really just taking pot shots and more of a reactionary kind of a thing throughout. He felt that Vietnam was something that he wanted to pursue because, as deluded as he was about it, he felt that in order to be considered in his legacy that he wanted to leave behind as a great president, he also had to be a great wartime president, just like Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Franklin D. Roosevelt. And otherwise, if he didn't have a war going on, then he couldn't have ever been into that category. And
this was
he
to get reelected.
Set up.
Hold
Yeah,
on,
but
one
he's-
quick thing. This was to get elected in '68. He ordered Moshe Dayan to sink the Liberty in '67.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Actually, the planning for all of that, as I've shown, and as other books, including one of the first books on the Liberty, was a book by James Ennis, who was a survivor, and he wrote that book in 1979, and yet he did not put in this piece about a document that he later discovered in the LBJ library, which documented the fact that Johnson's high-level committee, it's called the 303 Committee, had been working on the planning of what was called Frontlet 615 since about 1965, perhaps even earlier, back into 64, the latter part of 64. But for over 2 years, they had been working on this, and he discovered a document that had been simply misfiled there in the LBJ library, in the Liberty file, that was dated April, I think it was the 17th of 1967. And right in that document, this misfiled document, it referred to the fact that there would be this operation was called Frontlet 615, that was identified there, and it was all about having a U.S. ship out there in the Eastern Mediterranean, and that there would be submarine, and someone noted submarine in UAR waters. Well, that was one of the submarines. There were a number of them, U.S. submarines, unbeknownst to Israel or anyone else, out there, and that they actually filmed the whole operation. And
wait, don't rush. How did they fail? They didn't answer Mayday, and what went wrong here?
There were a lot of things that went wrong. In the lead up, the very first, the major failure was that this so-called spontaneous war was scheduled to start on June the 15th. However, things got out of hand with all the provocations. The provocations, by the way, that Moshe Dayan and other leaders acknowledged, even David Ben-Gurion acknowledged that they were pressing against Syria and Jordan as well as Egypt in the lead up, trying to get a reaction, but they were trying to make that reaction occur on June the 15th. Well, things got out of hand, and it started early, 10 days early. So on June the 5th, when they started the battle, the 6-day war, that is, the Liberty hadn't even arrived yet. It was still off the coast of Greece, I think, still coming into the area, and that was the biggest problem of all, because without the Liberty there to sink on that first day of the war, well, then they had to keep holding it off and keep stalling.
So
and
they
actually
actually
stalled the peace negotiations, which were already in process at the UN, because
the war
they
was
weren't
over.
ready.
There was nothing to attack. That's where the Liberty has the problem.
So the Liberty never got in place until June the 8th that morning, and so at that point, any rational person would have said, "Oh, the hell, we got to cancel everything. That's not going to work now." But not Johnson. And that point is, he was not rational. You see, that was to him, that was the centerpiece of the whole operation, was the sinking of his own ship, in order to allow him this pretext to bomb Cairo and
not just
search
bomb,
the military. Nuke. Yeah, that's
right.
Exactly right. And so that was everything to him. He had to have that happen because he felt that without that, he might not get reelected president in the following year. But with that, well, he'd have the support of everybody in the country, especially.
And the Russians are out of the Middle East.
Yeah,
two at once.
Right, and even though it risked this major conflagration, possibly a nuclear conflagration, right over Israel, well, no wonder David Ben-Gurion was upset with Rabin. No wonder. Of course, anybody in their right mind should have seen that. And I think the fact that Rabin had gone along with it before, and that's what caused him to go into this nervous breakdown he had, the collapse that he suffered at that point, was because he realized that he had been pressed into something that he shouldn't have been.
No, that would have been Rabin. Ben-Gurion didn't collapse. Rabin.
No, I never said that. That's what I meant. I said Rabin.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nervous breakdown. He was of no use to anybody while this war went on.
Exactly. That's right, Barry. And anyway, that was the first thing that went wrong. But the whole series of things went wrong, including they fired when they finally fired the first four torpedoes.
Oh, wait. Let's not jump there. Let's do this in order. First, the ships, and by the way, the pilot told me and Hunim the same thing. If we wanted to sink it, we would have sunk it. All right, we muffed it. But
oh well, that's an interesting point actually, because I've had this nagging feeling that there was a reason those 4 torpedoes missed. Okay, and
well, they hit a bit
because they decided they really didn't want to sink it. However, the 5th torpedo did hit the ship and almost sunk it.
It killed 9 of the men. It killed 9 men. But then came the torpedo boats, and they finished off. It was supposed to be the whole job, but it didn't work. But they killed 25 of the men after the Air Force failed.
That's right. Yeah, you're exactly right. And all of that happened. And like an hour after the initial attack, because if the first squadron of fighter jets from the 6th Fleet have been allowed to proceed onto the scene, that torpedo action would not have happened, because they would have been they would have had to retreat, and that would have been over. They never would have hit the Liberty with the torpedo. but it was because of Johnson wanted desperately for that ship to go down. He even said so. He even got on the phone, a secure phone with Admiral Larry Geese out there on the Sixth Fleet, who was in charge of that, and ordered him to recall, in his words, recall the wings.
Yes.
He said, I don't give a GD if the ship sinks and takes every sailor with it. I will not be embarrassed. I will not embarrass our ally. Well, it was him that didn't want to get embarrassed, because he knew that it was he who stuck his neck out and
that quote,
this
by
entire
the way,
operation and pressed Israel to go along with it against their will.
Let's not forget Johnson's quote. It's in your book, and it's also James Eames also quotes, "I don't care if the goddamn crew sinks." He said that.
Yeah.
He said that to the captain.
He said that
to
what
McNamara.
happened? Well,
Yes.
yeah. Originally, McNamara was right next to Johnson in the White House there in the Situation Room, and told Geese to recall the wings. Recall the squadron that had just been sent out, and so that happened the first time, and he recalled them on the basis of what McNamara said. But the second time, he objected. He said he had explained that he had sent two or different kinds of fighter jets that were incapable of even having nuclear bombs, because he thought that was the big concern. Okay, but that didn't work. McNamara ordered them to be returned anyway. Geese then asked him. He demanded to hear it directly from the president. He said, "I need to have this order verified." So Johnson got on the phone at that point
to the
and
fleet
told
commander.
him those words.
Yeah.
Recall the wings. I don't give a GT if the ship sinks and every man goes down with it, and so on. Yeah, that is exactly what he said.
That's a very significant quote, by the way. And
but
also,
all of these actions add up.
you forgot one last
look at
attack. Even the torpedo ships didn't sink it. There was one more helicopter attack.
Now the helicopters never actually attacked. They were there. There were two big helicopters filled with commandos ready to rappel down onto the ship and light charges, whatever. But that didn't happen because they had intercepted communications back and forth, but apparently they didn't realize that second set of squadrons fighter jets had been recalled as well. And so they hightailed it out of there, but not until 2.5 hours later. But for half an hour or more, 40 minutes, they just hovered, whop 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 over the ship. And
you realize
the ship was defenseless at that point. It was crippled, and the torpedo hole had caused the ship to list. And everybody on board thought it was going to sink, and they were just waiting for it to sink. Everybody assumed, well, it's going to sink because there's a big torpedo hole in the side. Well, it never sunk, and that's when things really went bad for Johnson, good for everybody else. But the helicopters took off, but that leaves us with that fifth torpedo. Yes. There is a guy who has been on other interviews, and I'm not going to name any names at this point because the people.
Richard Sturman, I'll betcha.
I'm sorry?
Richard Sturman? Maybe not.
No.
He was the Liberty radio man. What he claimed
there's another fellow on there who claims that he talked to two men on one of the submarines who actually told him that order to fire the final fatal torpedo came from Johnson to that submarine, and that they had fired the torpedo.
An American sub?
Yes. That's what one of the survivors has claimed. He said it a few times, and the problem is he can't get the people who have witnessed that.
Well, why didn't it sink then?
Why didn't it sink? Some people call it divine intervention. I mean, it should have sunk. But what happened was it hit, unfortunately for the people who were firing it, for their desires to sink it, it hit the ship right on an I-beam underneath. In other words, it deflected the torpedo sufficiently that it exploded outside of the ship.
So shoot another one.
Penetrate it and then explode on the inside.
So you got more than one torpedo?
No, there's a question as to whether it was the fifth or the sixth torpedo, but each of the torpedo, there were only 3 torpedo boats, and each of them supposedly had 2 torpedoes. So who knows whether it was the fifth or the sixth? It must have been. It's arguably the sixth, because at that point they gave up trying to shoot it with trying to fire on it. However,
however,
there were only 4, possibly just 4 torpedoes that were workable and fired at it, all of which missed, because according to this story, if it's true, and I'm not going to go any further than that, I'm just saying it is what it is. This fellow has said, and he's a very reputable guy who's one of the surviving men on board, said that he had found someone who knew all the details of what really happened out there, and that the real story was that Johnson was so upset that with the whole works that he ordered his own sub to shoot that torpedo.
Don't you disobey an order like that?
Well, it's hard to second guess. I mean, you had to be there. I know that it's incredible. It's just so.
Where's the morality of kill your own man? My goodness gracious.
Well, yeah, that's true. But
look, I'm going to add one thing because we're running out of time.
Here, the president give that order. Well, then it's the same as what Admiral Geese had to do out there. He had to weigh the pros and cons. I mean, if he had not obeyed the presidential order, he would have found himself, in court-martial, or worse, as they were threatened all the other survivors. They went around and told each and every one of the survivors and the men on the other ships who had been finally called in to help matters to keep their lips sealed, never say a word about it to anybody, including their wives, their girlfriends, their mother and father, nobody.
I got an Israeli to talk.
What worse means.
I got an Israeli to talk, and that was a long time ago, but I want to add the Liberty radio man, Richard Sturman, said that they sent out Mayday signals and they were blocked. And he said whoever attacked us had prior knowledge of shore-based receivers of the 5 frequencies used by the ships. They were ready for us.
They were ready to jam those radio frequencies. And in order to do that, they had to know what they were, and that they certainly weren't radio frequencies.
Phillip, we did well, but we're out of time. That was a good, real good interview. Always glad to hear you. I will push your next book, Don't Lose Me. And people, if I'm not totally hacked, I will get to Phillip. And what the heck? Let's hope I'm not totally hacked.
We'll see you. Talk to you next time.
I enjoyed it. Folks, this is Barry Chamish. I'll see you next Tuesday night.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.